On an average afternoon, a hiker steps off a trail in the Nevada desert, walks 50 yards into what looks like open, featureless ground, and disappears. Not metaphorically, literally. The ground gives way beneath him, and he drops into a vertical mine shaft that has been sitting there, unmarked, since the 1880s. This is not a hypothetical, it is the documented shape of how the Nevada desert kills people, and it is one of the least visible dangers in one of the most misunderstood landscapes in North America. Nevada is the most arid state in the United States, and it is also, by the most precise available count, the most thoroughly hollowed out. The Nevada Division of Minerals has been cataloging abandoned mines for nearly 4 decades. As of their most recent report, they have documented over 161,000 mine-related features across the state. More than 26,000 of those were classified as hazardous. Field crews in 2024 alone identified over 1,000 previously unknown hazards. The Nevada desert does not look like a landscape riddled with invisible vertical drops, scalding geothermal water, radioactive groundwater, and military testing grounds saturated with unexploded ordnance. It looks like open space, vast, quiet, accessible. That appearance is the source of its most consistent lethality. Every year, millions of people move through Nevada's desert, on highways, on hiking trails, in off-road vehicles, on roads that GPS systems confidently direct them down without knowing the road ends 20 miles from the nearest pavement. Most leave without incident, but hidden behind that uneventful majority is a pattern of death and disappearance that the landscape's visual emptiness consistently fails to communicate. The desert does not announce its dangers. It presents itself as nothing, and nothing is exactly what most visitors are prepared for. The illusion of safety in the Nevada desert operates differently than it does at the Grand Canyon or the Boundary Waters, but by the same mechanism. At those places, managed infrastructure signals a controlled environment. In Nevada, the illusion is more fundamental. The absence of visible infrastructure reads as the absence of risk. Open ground reads as safe ground. A dry wash reads as a walking path. A geothermal spring reads as a place to cool off. A tunnel mouth reads as shade. Each of these readings is wrong, and in each case, the cost of being wrong is immediate and severe. The first illusion is that the desert floor is solid. Nevada's mining history began in earnest in 1849 when prospectors following a wagon train discovered gold near what is now Dayton and worked their way upstream to the massive Comstock lode in Virginia City. Within a decade, mines were opening across the entire state. The first recorded abandonment was in 1857. By the time the mining booms ended, the state was laced with hundreds of thousands of shafts, adits, and tunnels, many of them unmarked, unfenced, and indistinguishable from the surrounding terrain. The desert's surface crust, dried and wind-scoured, can bridge the mouth of a vertical shaft just long enough for a person to walk onto it. The shaft beneath may be 10 feet deep or 400. Since 1961, at least 19 people have died in Nevada's abandoned mines, along with 24 more who were injured. Those are only the reported incidents. Many shafts are so remote that a person could fall in and never be found. The second illusion is that the desert's dangers are visible. The hazards most people associate with desert environments, heat, rattlesnakes, dehydration, are real and present in the Nevada desert. They are also the hazards that are most culturally legible, most discussed in guidebooks and safety briefings, and most readily identified by the visual and instinctive threat detection systems that humans bring to unfamiliar environments. The dangers that kill most efficiently in this desert are the ones that are invisible. Radioactive groundwater migrating through underground aquifers, poisonous gases pooling in the low points of abandoned mine tunnels, flash floods moving through canyons 20 miles from where the rain is falling, and geothermal water that looks calm and inviting at temperatures high enough to cause fatal scalding in seconds. The third illusion is that remoteness is self-correcting, that a landscape this empty will simply turn people back before it harms them. It does not. The Nevada desert is remote in a way that eliminates rather than prevents consequences. Esmeralda County covers 3,500 square miles with a population of roughly 1,000 people. Cell service across the desert basin is intermittent to non-existent. A vehicle that breaks down on a dirt road can strand its occupants 20 miles from the nearest human being in temperatures that can exceed 114 degrees Fahrenheit. The desert does not turn people back, it waits. Start with the ground, because the ground is where the Nevada desert's oldest and most geographically pervasive danger lives. The Nevada Bureau of Mines and Geology has published a detailed guide to the hazards inside abandoned mine tunnels, and it catalogs ways to die that most visitors to the desert have never considered. Bad air, oxygen-depleted or carbon dioxide-heavy atmospheres, pools in the low sections of old tunnels. A person walking into such a tunnel may be breathing clean air above the gas layer, but the movement of their body mixes the gases upward. By the time they turn to leave, climbing and breathing harder, they inhale the concentrated mixture. Dizziness arrives first, then unconsciousness, then death from asphyxiation or from the fall. Old dynamite and blasting caps scattered through these tunnels have been sweating nitroglycerin for a century or more, growing chemically unstable with every passing year. Even experienced miners refuse to handle old explosives. A single deteriorated stick can detonate from being touched or stepped on. Wooden ladders that appear solid have been rotting from the inside for decades. They hold until they do not, and a vertical ladder with a rotted rung gives no warning before it fails. Rattlesnakes use mine openings as dens, seeking cool shade in summer and warmth in winter. Minor vibrations, a footstep, a voice echoing off the walls, can trigger cave-ins in passages that have been slowly fracturing since before anyone alive today was born. And the leading cause of death in abandoned mines, according to Nevada officials, is not any of these. It is drowning. Old pits and quarries fill with water over the decades. Their walls are steep, slippery, and offer no purchase. There is no way to climb out. The state launched its Stay Out, Stay Alive campaign to address this, reaching 3.2 million people last year through social media, billboards, and classroom presentations. After more than 3 decades of surveying, the division has secured roughly 82% of known hazardous sites. That figure sounds reassuring until it is placed against the other figure. New hazards are still being found every year, and there are entire regions of the state that have never been surveyed. The known hazards are the ones that have been found. The unknown hazards are, by definition, indistinguishable from open ground. But the mine shafts are visible, at least in principle. They can be located, cataloged, fenced, and marked. The Nevada desert's second category of danger cannot be fenced, and it cannot be marked because it is already inside the system. Between 1951 and 1992, the United States detonated 928 nuclear weapons at the Nevada test site, a 1,360 square mile facility located 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas. 100 of those tests were conducted above ground, producing mushroom clouds visible from 100 miles away and spreading radioactive fallout across downwind communities in Nevada and Utah. The remaining 828 tests were underground. Roughly 1/3 of those underground detonations occurred directly inside aquifers, in the water table itself. Each explosion vaporized a chamber in the bedrock, some as deep as 4,800 feet, leaving behind cavities filled with radioactive rubble and contaminated groundwater. By the time underground testing ended in 1992, the Department of Energy estimated that more than 300 megacuries of radioactivity remained trapped in the subsurface environment. A Nevada hydrogeologist named Thomas Bucco studied the contamination for Nye County and calculated that the underground tests had polluted approximately 1.6 trillion gallons of groundwater. Water that, had it not been poisoned, would be worth an estimated $48 billion in a state where clean water is already desperately scarce. The Nevada test site has been called the most bombed place on Earth, and the description is not hyperbole. Sedan Crater, created by a 104 kiloton thermonuclear device detonated 320 feet underground in 1962, displaced 12 million tons of earth and left a hole 1,300 feet wide and 320 feet deep, nearly 7 times the explosive yield of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, channeled into the rock and water beneath the desert floor. What makes this contamination particularly difficult to communicate is that it moves. Radioactive groundwater follows the same underground pathways that clean water has traveled for millennia, migrating slowly through the aquifer system at rates between 3 inches and 18 feet per year. Tritium, the most mobile radioactive contaminant from the tests, was first detected off-site in 2009 near Pahute Mesa in the northwest corner of the test site. That was the first confirmed evidence of nuclear contamination migrating beyond the facility's boundaries. Scientists predict it will take roughly 240 years for that tritium-laced water to travel another 14 miles to the nearest public water source. Communities like Beatty and Amargosa Valley, located down gradient of the test site, rely on monitoring programs that sample wells and springs annually. The atmospheric tests produced visible, dramatic fallout that affected communities across the region and led to elevated cancer and leukemia rates that prompted federal compensation programs in 1990. The underground contamination is slower, quieter, and will outlast every person affected by the atmospheric tests by centuries. The Nevada desert also kills with water in ways that have nothing to do with contamination and that operate on timescales of minutes rather than centuries. Flash floods are a leading cause of death in canyon country across the American Southwest, and Nevada's desert basin is cut through with narrow canyons and dry washes that can fill with violent debris-laden water in minutes. The rain does not need to fall where a visitor is standing. A thunderstorm 20 miles upstream sends water down through the drainage system with no visible warning at the downstream end. No clouds overhead, no darkening sky, no sound until the wall of water carrying boulders and timber is already in the canyon. In July 2023, 2 women set out on a hiking trail at Valley of Fire State Park, roughly 65 miles northeast of Las Vegas. The temperature that day reached 114 degrees Fahrenheit. They ran out of water. One was found dead on the trail, a quarter-mile from the parking lot. The other was found dead farther up, where the trail cuts through a canyon. Clark County reported at least 16 heat-related deaths that summer. The heat wave of 2005 killed 17 people and remains Nevada's deadliest recorded natural disaster. Nevada has hundreds of natural geothermal springs, and some of them are beautiful. But water temperatures in these springs regularly exceed 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Some reach 180. Human skin scalds in 3 seconds at 140 degrees. Dogs have leapt into these springs and died before they could be pulled out. On a hot day, steam does not always rise visibly from a dangerously hot spring. The water can look calm, clear, and inviting at temperatures that will cause fatal burns before a person can climb out. The same geological forces that make Nevada's underground environment radioactively contaminated also make its surface water thermally lethal, and neither hazard announces itself in the way that the desert's more legible dangers do. The isolation that makes all of these dangers more severe also makes their consequences harder to reverse, and the record of what happens when they combine is consistent and grim. An Indiana couple, Ronnie and Beverly Barker, ages 72 and 69, were on a road trip when their RV became stuck in a remote mountain area near Silver Peak, Nevada. By the time search teams followed tire tracks 2 miles into the desert, Ronnie was dead. Beverly was airlifted to a hospital in Reno. An 11-year-old boy died in Death Valley after his family's GPS directed them onto a dirt road where their Jeep became buried in sand up to its axles. They survived for days on bottled water. His mother hiked to the highest point she could reach trying to get a cell signal. It did not work. A park ranger eventually found her waving for help from outside the vehicle. Her son was inside. In Death Valley's Saline Valley, accessible only by rough dirt roads, a man known locally as Badwater Bob disappeared in 2021 after visiting the area's hot springs. His pickup was found parked on a dirt road. A large search found nothing. The area has its own history of disappearances. In 1986, Barry Berman and his wife Louise left camp at the hot springs for a morning walk and were never seen alive again. Their remains were found 3 years later by a passing hiker. The desert does not hide evidence deliberately, it simply does not care enough to preserve it. A body left in the open can be reduced to scattered bones by scavengers within days. A car driven off a remote road may not be found for months or years or ever. And then there is the dimension of the Nevada desert that is dangerous not because of what nature has done to it, but because of what the government has done and continues to do in its most remote sections. Roughly 80% of Nevada's land is owned by the federal government, and a significant portion of that land is military, restricted, and entirely off-limits to the public. The Nevada Test and Training Range encompasses more than 4.5 million acres, making it one of the largest restricted military zones on Earth. Area 51, formerly Homey Airport, sits inside this complex, its perimeter marked with orange posts and patrolled by armed guards authorized to use lethal force against airspace violations. The Tonopah Test Range, sometimes called Area 52, covers 625 square miles to the northwest and is used for nuclear weapons stockpile testing and classified aircraft development. The F-117 stealth fighter was tested here in secret for years before its existence was publicly acknowledged. The ground around these facilities is littered with decades of unexploded ordnance from weapons testing programs, bombs, shells, and experimental munitions that missed their targets or failed to detonate, buried under a thin layer of desert dust. Nevada has the highest concentration of classified military sites in the United States. The reason is the same reason the Nevada test site was chosen for nuclear weapons testing in the first place. The desert is remote, empty, and enormous. It is the perfect place to test things that should not be seen. What that also means is that vast stretches of the Nevada desert are dangerous in ways that no warning sign can fully describe because the full description is classified. Here is what ties all of this together and what makes the Nevada desert genuinely different in character from the other dangerous American landscapes that produce the same pattern of preventable death. The Grand Canyon announces its own danger. It is visually extreme, a mile-deep void that no visitor mistakes for ordinary terrain. The Boundary Waters danger is embedded in the gap between air temperature and water temperature, between the calm surface of a lake and what the water does to a swimmer within minutes of immersion. The Nevada desert's danger is embedded in the ground itself, in the water itself, in the air inside tunnels, and the temperature of springs, and the trajectory of contamination plumes moving through aquifer systems at 3 inches per year. None of it is visible. None of it fits the threat detection framework that humans bring to unfamiliar environments, because those frameworks evolved for biological threats. Predators, poisonous plants, dangerous terrain, not for vertical shafts hidden beneath desert crust or radioactive groundwater moving through rock or unexploded ordnance buried under 40 years of wind-blown sand. The people who have understood this desert best are the ones who lived with it longest. The Shoshone and Paiute peoples who have lived in this region for thousands of years knew which springs were safe and which would kill. They knew the underground water was connected across hundreds of miles. They mapped the danger not with instruments but with oral tradition, passing warnings from generation to generation. They did not need a federal agency to tell them the desert was dangerous. They already knew because they respected it enough to pay attention. The Nevada desert is not trying to kill anyone who enters it. It is simply being what it has been: a vast, arid, geologically active, radiologically contaminated, militarily occupied landscape that operates according to physical laws that do not make exceptions for visitors, GPS systems, or itineraries. The mine shafts do not know a hiker is above them. The groundwater does not know a community well is 14 miles down gradient. The flash flood does not know a canyon is occupied. The hot spring does not know the water is too hot to survive. It doesn't care that you drove here. For the weekend, it never did. Subscribe, because the wilderness doesn't warn you, and someone should.